How much creatine is important for cognitive performance? You may have heard of creatine for muscle growth, but did you know it also enhances cognitive function? Could this common supplement be the key for lowering brain inflammation and increasing focus and attention? Scientists are discovering that creatine is not just for athletes. In fact, it can be for people in their 80s or 90s who want to enhance their cognitive function. So what is creatine? Creatine is 3 amino acids. It's methionine, it's arginine, and it's glycine. And the beautiful thing about creatine is it's made primarily in the skeletal muscles. So if you're like me and you love a good steak, well, you're going to be getting an enormous amount of creatine, especially if it's from a grass-fed, grass-finished beef, or maybe bison or an elk. Maybe you're a hunter and so you get your own meat. That is where you're going to get the best sources of creatine. Now, creatine is one of the safest supplements on the planet and the most well-researched. So when we talk about supplements, there's varying outcomes and you don't always know what you're getting. But with creatine, if you use it right, not only is it great for muscle mass, but it also can boost cognitive performance. So most people dose creatine at 5 grams. And so if you get a bag of creatine, you can scoop the creatine out. The scoop is typically 1 serving is 5 grams. The issue with that is 5 grams may not be enough to get you where you want to go based on your goals. So anytime you're building out your body operating system, you want to say, well, okay, there's 3 organ systems that you want to protect when it comes to your future health. And so organ number 1 is what we're talking about today is your brain. And that's really important because it doesn't really do you any good if you arrive 10 years from now and you're very healthy and fit, but your brain doesn't work, right? The second organ you want to protect is your heart, because your heart is what produces all the circulation in your body, which moves all the nutrients, all the hormones, everything that your body needs to survive, all the oxygen, carbon dioxide. The third organ, which is not always thought of as an organ, but it is the largest and takes up the most proportionally the most volume in your body, is called muscle. And so this muscle mass is where the creatine is actually made naturally in your body. It's also made in the muscles of animals that you may or may not eat. And if you're vegetarian, I apologize, but the creatine is found in immense properties in the muscle. So creatine, if you're looking to maximize cognitive performance, 5 grams may not get you where you want to go. This is where you want to increase the amount that you're using and up it to about 20 milligrams. Now you may be saying, well, I take creatine and it upsets my stomach. And not all creatine is made equal. And so some of the creatine you'll find that upsets your stomach, they haven't broken it down properly. And so there's too much of a burden on your digestive system. So one thing you can do if you do struggle with creatine is you can add some enzymes, or you can simply put some apple cider vinegar and a little bit of lemon juice in a glass of water when you take your creatine. And that can help with some of the gastric enzymes that are needed so that you can break it down. The other thing that I found is there's a creatine source that's a lot more readily available. And it comes from one of my favorite pharmacists. His name is Leonard Pastrana, and he has the company called New BioAge, but they make the iCell water. And that's CELL. And so it activates the creatine levels, and it also has some leucine in there. So leucine is an amino acid that helps you build muscle. So when you're thinking about all the great things you can do to build muscle mass, you need to have the raw materials so that your workouts actually lead to that end result, which is building better body composition, having muscle that can support you in whatever activities you love, whether you're a pickleball player, maybe you love tennis, maybe you're somebody who likes basketball. But what I noticed when I first started using creatine, I had a goal, and this is on my 45th birthday. I said, okay, I want to be able to touch the rim. And this was a couple of years ago. I said, when I was in high school, I could do that. And why can't I do it now? And so every year I have these challenges. And so I said, well, in order to touch the rim, I'm going to need to have a lot of muscle mass and a lot of proprioception. And in order to do that, I don't want to have pain, because pain can drag things along and it doesn't help. Pain is probably the area that impacts your brain more than anything. And so what I started researching, I said, well, what can help my brain and my muscles at the same time so that I can reach my goal? And because when I first started jumping, I was about 8 inches shy of the rim. So I said, wow, I got a lot of work to do. And I have a year on these challenges. And so I started researching, and everything came up as creatine. And I said, okay, how much creatine is important? And so there's a thing called the creatine loading, where you start with a higher amount and then you taper it down. But then I also saw that there's some diminishing returns with that process. And so I said, well, I'm going to stick to 20 grams, and I'm going to do this over the course of 3 months. And I was working on jumping. I had Tristan, one of our fitness advisors and program advisors at East West Health. And Tristan started giving me all these exercises to do. So I was jumping off high platforms and landing, and I worked on landing first. And then I started working on power. And I noticed as I added the creatine in, not only did I have better cognitive focus and cognitive function, but I noticed my vertical increased. And then the other thing I did is I added on these 2 peptides to help with proprioception. One is called 5-amino-1-MQ. And what 5-amino-1-MQ does, similar to creatine, is it helps produce more ATP. And so for those of you who don't know what ATP is, it is the byproduct of energy production. So ATP is the amount of energy that we can measure from cells. And so with creatine and 5-amino-1-MQ, when you combine those, the 5-amino-1-MQ is working on a pathway that causes your body to burn fat more effectively, and it turns off what's called lipogenesis, or the formation of new fat cells. So you turn off the fat production, which lowers your inflammation. And then it also activates more of your body's own NAD production. And when I combine those two, I was able to increase my vertical almost overnight. And then I wasn't sore the next day because I was doing different types of squats. I was doing these full-length lunges that I still do. You can go to knees over toes, and Ben Patrick lays out a phenomenal platform for increasing your vert. And then what happened is about 90 days into the experiment, where I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to touch the rim, I can now dunk a basketball. And I'm not very tall, I'm not very athletically gifted. As you could see, well, maybe you can't see, but I can dunk a basketball as long as you lower it to 8 feet. Okay, so I can't dunk a basketball, but what I can do is I increase my vertical by over 7 inches. And so I'm just fractionally away from the rim, and I worked on that over the course of the year. And so I was able to improve my vertical just by adding in creatine. So the way that you can jump in here is you can look at creatine. It supports inflammatory pathways, but the best thing that creatine can do cognitively is it will help you stay focused longer. It can help you sleep deeper, so you'll get more deep sleep, and it will help you recover. So you can start with 5 grams and then work up to 10 and then 15, then 20, and just watch your stomach. Like I mentioned, if you have any issues, add some apple cider vinegar. You can also add some lemon juice to water when you take your creatine. And then the other thing you can add in are peptides like 5-amino-1-MQ. I also added in another peptide called MOD-SC. And MOD-SC is more phenotypically expressed in people who live a long time, but it also helps with endurance, and it works right on the satellite cells. So I was using the sauna because heat shock proteins from heat exposure also express that MOD-SC. And so by combining these very amazing ingredients, that's where I've noticed better mental focus, better cognitive clarity, and it actually has helped improve my athletic performance. So if you like that information and you want to go deeper on things that can not only help your brain perform better, but your cardiovascular system and your hormones, watch my next video, and I'll see you there.